everybody. Thanks for coming today for our session on ITT. So we have our senior therapist, Taylor, and then the instructor therapist, Pam, and myself, Laurie. So we appreciate that everybody filled out the pre-test, which helped us to create our slideshow for today to help you learn a little more about ITT. So thank you for coming.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to our session. We had given out to begin with a pre-test, or pre-knowledge, I should say, about what you know about intensive teaching trial, and we based our PowerPoint on what you know or don't know. So the agenda for today, we are going to go through the objectives. We are going to explain what ITT is. We are going to explain the benefits, the settings and materials that we need, components and strategies of ITT. Also, we're going to talk about observing an ITT session video that we have, answer any questions, and then a post-test evaluation of the session to see what you've learned, and a take-home bag with different components that you can use to do your own ITT session. And Taylor is going to talk about ITT in depth.
Awesome. So first we're going to talk about the objectives. The first one is you will be able to define what ITT stands for and describe what it is. The second one, you will be able to identify what materials are needed and how to set up an ITT session. The third one, you will be able to gain a better understanding of ITT and what is involved in it. And the fourth one, you will be exposed and experience observing an ITT session in both the natural and clinical setting. So what is ITT? ITT stands for Intensive Teaching Trial. It's a teaching technique used to teach children on the autism spectrum. Intensive meaning it usually is fast-paced, repetitive, and over a period of time. Teaching meaning where the instructor uses specific materials geared to the learner and focuses on skills specific to the learner. Trial meaning a test in performance. ITT sessions are typically seen where an instructor is sitting at a table across from the learner in a controlled environment, but it can also be done in a natural environment, also known as a net. And that's where the learning opportunities can be more spontaneous and generalized. ITT has 3 parts to it: instruction, response, and consequence, which we'll discuss further in the presentation. So benefits of ITT. What do you guys think are some benefits of ITT?
I know with my son, he has been working with one of the therapists, and he actually enjoys going to work, and he has fun because he gets to have treats.
Yeah.
And my son, I bring him because I know that you guys really focus with him and can give him that attention. And I just love that he now can wave his hand and he says bye when I leave. He didn't speak at all before, so that's why I bring him.
So those are really good examples. The ones we have written down is the training for each child is individualized and based on the specific needs and abilities of the child. So uses rewards to encourage children to learn and use new skills. Children with ASD have a harder time learning a new skill, so ITT breaks it down into smaller steps so it's easier to learn. Each step is mastered before moving to the next step. There's constant repetition, which increases the ability to generalize and maintain a skill. The new skill will then hopefully be permanently acquired. Can improve skills by teaching communication and social cues. So setting up an ITT session, first you're going to need your program cards. Everybody will have a program box which contains all the cards. And I will just go through a few card examples. So one is imitation of motor movements, which could be saying do this or copy me. So it could be like copy me. Do this. Yeah, that's fine. Tackling common objects. So you could say, what is it? And they would say, sunflower. And the third one I have is tackling ongoing actions. So you could say, what is the person doing? And they would say, She's raking. So you'll have multiple reinforcers, which we'll talk about more later in the presentation. Any applicable program materials related to the skill being taught. So for example, I know some of the learners have patterning and block building. So you just want to make sure that they're near you so they're easy to grab. Quiet, sanitized environment. So no distractions and not too many toys around. You want instructional control, so that the learner is willing to learn from you. And you need a way to track the data, so it can be either paper or on a device. So what does ITT involve? Instructional control, errorless teaching, error correction, reinforcement, components, prompting, ABA principles, and motivation. And now Pam is going to talk to you more about it.
So with ITT, there is 3 main components of it that Tara had mentioned before. There's the instruction, the response, and consequence. So the instruction is a stimulus, or you might see SD written on some instruction cards. It's what the instructor gives an instruction. So an example would be touch nose, and then the response, the learner either responds correctly or he or she responds incorrectly, or doesn't respond at all. So the response would be the learner touches their nose. For consequences, the learner receives feedback immediately after the response. If they did it correct, then they receive reinforcements and through edible or praises through social reinforcements. And then also if they error, then the instruction will be repeated again, and they will go through the process again of the 3 components. There's different ITT strategies. There's prompting, error correction, errorless teaching, and reinforcements. One of the main ones is prompting. When prompting is when your assistance is given to a learner for them to reach the targeted or correct response, or next step in a skill that has multiple steps involved. And some learners become dependent on prompts, so it's important to fade them out, and whenever possible to create independence. There's a full physical prompt, so this is more like, obviously as it states, it's full physical. So you'll, for an example, wash hands. You will take the learner, grab their hands, and put them underneath the sink, under the tap to wash their hands. Partial physical would be just gently, partially touching them. So maybe just gently pushing their elbows so it guides them to the sink so that they wash their hands. The next one is modeling. Does anybody have an example for modeling of what a modeling prompt would be for washing hands?
Like acting it?
That's right. Where you would, the instructor or the parent or grandparent would act out how to wash hands. So you'd say wash hands, and you would go to the sink and wash your hands and show them the steps. There's gestural prompting, which would be pointing to the sink, like wash hands, first get soap, and you would point to each of the steps involved. And then verbal. This one's obviously pretty self-explanatory for prompting. Do you guys have an idea what verbal prompting would be?
Using your voice.
Using your voice. So you would say, you have to wash your hands, and then you can prompt them with your voice for the steps involved to wash your hands. This is some examples for washing hands we just went through. And then another important strategy is errorless teaching. As it sounds, there's no error for the child to involve in. As in your handout that you have on your seats, it shows the example of errorless teaching and the steps involved in it. But the basics is errorless teaching is when the child is not given the opportunity to make a mistake. The instructor asks a question or gives an instruction and immediately provides the answer. This allows the learner to know what to say, and they cannot err. After a few trial run-throughs, the instructor should slowly fade out the prompt by just saying half the word, and then the child completes the rest and then reduces to just the sound of the first letter and then fading out. So if you said, what's this? Cow, for holding an ornament, a toy, and the learner will say cow, and then if you said it again, this is a k, and they'd say cow, and then if you just hold it up, they would be able to say that it is a cow. You have some examples on your handout for this. And now to further explain another strategy of error correction is Laurie, in the case that a learner does error, what to do and how to correct that.
Perfect. So thank you, Pam. So just like she had explained, errorless teaching is to make sure that your child is not given the opportunity to error, but sometimes that may happen. So in the event that they do, that's where we pull in error correction. So error correction is when an incorrect response is given, and so we use those 5 areas of prompting that Pam had made mention of, where we might give an instruction, your child gives an incorrect response, and so we give the instruction again, and we use either that full physical, that partial modeling gesture, or verbal prompt to help them to get the answer correct the next time, or respond how we want them to. So again, your handout on that everybody got on their seat gives an actual instruction or an actual example on how error correction with those steps might be used. The last strategy that we're going to talk about today is reinforcers, which ties in with the third component of an ITT. So there are 4 types of reinforcers that can be given to increase the likelihood that your child is going to answer that way or respond that way again. There's an acronym that we like to use to remember what the 4 different types of reinforcers are, and that is the acronym SEAT. So if everybody can take a minute now and just look under their seat, there should be a card taped underneath. So if you can just pull that out, and we'll quickly go through what each of the 4 are. So does somebody, if you're willing to talk, if not, maybe pass it to somebody else in the group. But if somebody has the S, can they maybe say what that stands for?
It stands for social. It says the definition refers to reinforcers such as smiles, acceptance, praise, attention from other people. Okay.
Perfect. So anything that's social, so like could be a high five as well, that smile, kind of, yeah, good job, buddy, those kinds of things. So that's for the S. Does somebody have the E?
Yeah, I have the E. It stands for edible, so it refers to reinforcers that are preferred pieces of food or drink, so like Smarties or pieces of cookies or chips.
Yeah. So again, here's Smarties here, goldfish crackers. We do like to use edibles in the center, but again, like you know, we only use that after approval from you as the parent, but maybe that's something that your child really looks forward to or would work or be motivated for, is an edible of some kind. What about A? Who has A?
I have A for activity, so it's they get to reinforce them so they can participate in a preferred activity, which could be watching TV or an iPad or going on the swings.
Yeah. So another one at the center we have is an activity with letters, and this talks back to you. Play-Doh is another one that's quite popular at the center as well, but something that the child really likes to engage in, that they can work on a little bit. So that's for the activity. Our last one is T. So who has T?
I do. It says it refers to reinforcers such as preferred objects or toys, stickers, toy trains, small prizes.
Yeah, so anything tangible at all. So like this is this little snap bracelet, anything like that. Something that they physically can have with their hands. So it's important to remember that we pick reinforcers that are geared towards your children or your child. So not what we think is important for them, but is important to them, and we know that they're going to be motivated and want to work towards it. Because that's going to get them to want to do the right answer. So looking at ITT as a whole and all together, we talked about its 3 components. So here we've got show me clapping. So the parent is asking the child to show me clapping. Here the child is not giving the correct response. They're putting their arms outwards. So we do not reinforce at all here, which makes us ask the question again. So we asked, show me clapping, and then we talked about those prompts that Pam had mentioned about. So here, this is a partial prompt. So he's helping to guide the child to start to learn how to clap. You see, he's let go, and now she's actually doing it. And that consequence at the end, yay, great job, which is that social praise we talked about. And then again, later on, just testing to see if she's remembered that or not. So the parent asks again, show me clapping. In this example, the child then has learned it and does the correct response, and that consequence, good job for clapping. So again, that was another social praise. So we do have a couple videos, one to show you, like Taylor had mentioned, in a clinical setting, which is where your children come here at a table, but also a natural setting where the responses might be more spontaneous and the teaching more spontaneous that Taylor had made mention of. We're not going to show these videos today, but they are on your handout as well if you wanted to look at them and certainly have any questions. I encourage you, while you watch these videos, to see if you can pick out the instruction, the response, the consequence, and if there was any prompting in there. So in summary, or in conclusion, ITT stands for Intensive Teaching Trial. It's usually fast-paced, individualized, and repetitive. It's comprised of an instruction, a response, and a consequence. It can be implemented in both a clinical setting or in a more natural environment, and can be done by the therapist here, but also you guys as parents, caregivers, siblings. The more that the child is exposed to it, the great, which is why we're so happy you're here today to learn these skills and take them back with you. There's 4 types of reinforcers that we talked about with that acronym SEAT, and the 5 levels of prompting that Pam had made mention of as well, to make sure that your child can get that correct response that we're looking for. Does anybody have any questions today about what we've sort of shared? No, everybody's pretty good. So we want to thank everybody for coming. Like Pam had mentioned, we do have, I wouldn't say it's a test, but we do like to see what maybe you take from it. And maybe you don't have questions now, but you might have questions later. So if you can fill out our post-knowledge form that we have, that would be fantastic. So we'll give that to everybody, and then as you finish it, if you don't mind coming up, and then as promised, we have take-home bags for everybody that just reiterates the information again and gives some hands-on examples and cards that you guys can make yourselves, and that as well. So we appreciate all the time that you've given us today, and thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.